to introduce our next guest, who needs no introduction sometimes.
It all depends on the circles you run in.
That is true.
Or run away from, one or the other.
It's
going to be the one, the only
Lucas
Mr. Lucas Leverett.
Howdy.
Ooh, you sound wonderful today.
Perfect. Nice and warm and fuzzy.
That's good news. That's,
love the shirt.
$42 well spent on Amazon.
Right.
Nice. Hey, you should have been on costuming of the chief for microphones then.
Right? Yeah. So, I'm gonna fix this so you don't see this shitty face next to the door. There we go.
Well, turn it more then. We don't want to see that face. Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah. How are you fine gents this afternoon?
Doing pretty decent.
I'm alive and awake.
I'm glad to take part. Thank you guys for doing this.
Oh, thank you for coming in and hanging out with us for about an hour.
Any excuse to talk nerdy and drink old fashions on a Sunday afternoon is good with me.
There we go.
Me and Blake created a new drink last night, though.
Mm-hmm.
Oh yeah, you injecting some disinfectant?
You know it. You know it.
Oh yeah.
No.
That's 2 shots of Clorox, 1 shot bourbon. No,
that's right.
No.
There you go.
No.
That's not the answer.
It's called the Make It So, Lucas. It's the Make It So.
Yeah. I like this. This is already playing to my loves.
Captain Morgan Spice Rum. And
I fashioned a little makeshift badge since I thought we should be.
We should be festive. I want one.
Well, I think there was a design floated earlier. You're better off with that. This was printed off of the web, and it's just my ugly mug. So get something.
Oh, okay, okay.
We'll make something. Heck, I work at a print shop for crying out loud. So
there you go. Yeah, you're the one that's still employed in your printers, so you're better off.
Just barely. So, so Lucas, for those who don't know you, or those who need to know you again, who is Lucas Leverett, and what does he do inside and now outside of conventions?
Many things. So I've been in the semi-pro nerd world, as a lot of folks know, for I guess 20-something years now, which can be a liability, but it is a beautiful culture that I'm really happy to have been attracted to. And I co-founded and built MTAC, Middle Tennessee Anime Convention, spun off, created GMX, took over the Zombie Walk and produced that currently, and spent a couple years revitalizing HyperionCon, co-founded the Maker Faire, and multiple guest and assistance roles with other regional cons. And last year, my Dragon Con career turned 21 and was officially drinking age. I've staffed that for the first 19 years, and for the last 2 years took the vacation of not working, which is as addictive as people have promised me it would be.
You got updated to actual attendee.
Yeah, it's interesting to sleep in. A buddy of mine has a tour bus that gets parked in the parking lot next to the con, and the party entourage doesn't leave the bar until the bar closes, which is 2. And for 2 years now, I promised myself I'd be a grown-up and not stay on that bus till 4. It hasn't happened. I think I actually stepped off that bus at 4 a.m. every night last year. It's been fun. It's been a really interesting ride. There have been ups and downs that are sometimes widely publicized, sometimes not. But this has been an amazing culture to be involved with, and it was born of a forging necessity for my age group. A lot of folks were lucky enough to be born into geek being cool. Some of us, I like to use my favorite coaster. Some of us were OGs. And we built it. So it's been a lot of fun, and there's a lot of great fun still going on. Currently, other than Zombie Walk, I'm doing a spinoff of a column I used to write into its own blog called The Stump, and been doing a few other little geek brand projects here and there. And, there were some things that were supposed to happen this spring that I was going to be at or guest at, and they didn't happen, but that's okay. We're going to get through. So that's kind of the general summary, I guess.
Well, let's jump back to the Zombie Walk a little bit. How did you get hold of that? How did you become the man behind the Zombie Walk?
So I was approached by a friend of mine that's a DJ local to Nashville in the goth scene, and he has been involved with Dragon Con for a long time, and he was kind of the de facto chief of that glorified flash mob, essentially, is what it was. And the old tradition of zombie walks, so they take place on one day, World Zombie Day, and they benefit hunger charities of some kind. And he was just out of sight of his scope. And at the time, I was running the freshly minted Arts Cubed organization, so the first nonprofit for geek arts. And we had MTAC and GMX under our umbrella. We had a lot of other ideas of stuff we wanted to do. And he came up to me at Dragon Con one afternoon and said, "Man, I can't do the zombie walk anymore. It's too much for me. But I know you have an organization, you can support an event." And I said, "Well, maybe, you know, we're all volunteers and we're spread pretty thin. And regardless of the rumors, I never took any money home from it, so I can only do so much." But he said, you know, he really would appreciate if somebody that knew what they were doing with events took it over. I said, "Well, how many Facebook followers do you have?" Because we needed GMX to get a lot of audience. And he said about 7,500. And I said, "Okay, done." Because I wanted to put GMX in front of a zombie and horror interested crowd because it was that crossover. We boosted that following by over 1,000 over the next couple years. When my separation from MTAC and GMX Arts Cubed happened, for some reason, the people that were pulling that off, they kept the zombie walk, but we had a fight over the URL. They eventually managed to win the URL and the Facebook page for a while. And then they neglected to do the walk. They just completely didn't do the walk. And a local blogger, who's now my production partner, Dan Lee, he took him to town on his blog and basically said the horror community feels that this event should still happen, and it's unfortunate that you killed it. You know, you're supposed to take it and do things, and you killed it. He really went to town on him, and I heard about that, and he was on the Facebook page for the group asking for help from people saying, you know, "I love horror, I love zombies, but I don't know what I'm doing with events." And I messaged him. I said, "You, sir, and we need to have a beer." I gave him that backstory you just heard in a little more detail, and we shook hands. We wrote a letter of agreement that if we ever had any kind of issue, we would arbitrate, and that we were both co-equal. And now we are 50-50 producers of the Zombie Walk, and it's been wonderful. Dan's a really, really good guy, and he loves horror and all the B movie and, you know, BC level kind of community horror stuff and writing. So he's the perfect person to put passion into that, and I can help him with the event side of it. And we're doing some good, you know, raising food for Second Harvest Food Bank each time we do a zombie walk, which I really like. And this past year, I had kind of a transformative experience. I was setting up parking cones to block off spaces for all of us to park and stage photo ops and stuff downtown. And there was a homeless guy there that just chit-chatted with me, and he never asked me for anything. He just talked. And I sat there for like an hour. I got put really behind. I had to rush to decorate the bar for the after party afterward, but I didn't mind. And what was interesting was I kind of had this epiphany of like, we could do more with food related charity. So now we're considering doing a homeless breakfast at the site before the zombie walk setup, because I actually ended up giving him a little money on my own voluntary suggestion. And 20 minutes later, I was putting up zombie walk route signs and saw him handing out food from the market to all of his guys that were hanging out around Fort Nashboro. And that really got to me. I know some people that deal with homeless charities, and I think I can pull some people in to help. I think it'd be really interesting to spin it that way, because we may have a bigger homeless problem in a few months than we have now. And it'd be nice to be able to do a little bit of double duty.
That's amazing.
Very amazing.
This panel is called Confessions of a Con Guru, a Ask Me Anything with Lucas. So what's an insider confession you'd like to offer up?
Well, don't get him started, Robert. Don't get him started. Any good conversation with Lucas starts off, "Let's have a beer."
I'm sure I could come up with plenty of things. You know, there are plenty of moments, as you might imagine. I mean, when I started doing con running, I was real young. I don't think I could drink yet. You know, I was 19 or something. I learned 3 things in parallel that I'm not sure if anybody should ever learn this way or if it's better. If you ask Jessie, my long-suffering fiance, we're on the Gene Simmons plan. We've been together for 20 years and we're not married. But if you asked her, she'd say, no way in hell should anybody learn this. But I learned to be a grown-up. I learned to run and create a business. And I learned how to have relationships with long-term friends and my long-term partner, all at the same time. And that is what I blame for most of my mistakes, because I learned all that on the fly while inventing a version of fandom that has yet to be duplicated locally, at least. So some of it, I would say, damn right, I did that great job there. But there's plenty of stuff I messed up. And a lot of people don't hear it when I say that I've made mistakes or I apologize to somebody for making a mistake. I wish I'd been able to think about doing it more. That would be the biggest confession I could bring about the growth involved in running cons, is you don't have time to stop and think. And I'm not an empathetic person by nature, so it takes a lot of work for me to put myself in somebody else's shoes. And that's just a personality trait that sometimes has worked better. In business, I guarantee you the lack of empathy has been a big strength for me. When I've had bosses, I've almost always been fortunate enough in my day job to work for the head honcho, the CEO, the president, the owner. A lot of times those people didn't exactly have a huge pair, and they could sick me on the things that needed to be fixed, and it got fixed. So there's a certain charm to that, but I would say that my biggest takeaway is it would have been nice to learn, more about helping people like me in the right ways, and being aware of people that were pretending to like me for their own agenda. And that's the kind of advice I've given to younger people when they start cons. There were a couple of guys that started a con here locally, and one thing I told them was, watch out for the people that want to attach to your coattails. It took me 10 years to learn that they're really just hanging out with you because you're the cool kid right now. Everybody there likes what you do or what you bring to the table until the tables turn, and that's something that they have to receive. So everybody likes it when you're the bulldog until you have to be the bulldog to them, and then all of a sudden they don't love it so much. That's human nature.
Well, that does bring up...
Speaking of controversy, speaking of the tables turned, recent years of controversy, is there really truth there? And if not, why would people lie?
Before you mention that, Lucas, hold on. I got to interject, Robert, because people don't care. That's just part of it.
People don't care in which direction.
Exactly.
A couple of years ago, almost to the day, April 20th, I was dragged hard on the internet by a former really close friend, somebody who I looked up to, respected, and cherished for a good period of time. And there were in and outs over the years, and there was a lot of information kind of muddled in this post that was made. And Robert, to really directly answer your question, I made a crack that day about 40% of what was said being true. That 40% has been held in perpetuity for the last 2 years. So anything anybody ever says about me, someone else applies the 40% rule from 2 years ago and says, well, almost half of that stuff is true, so he's a terrible person, a monster. So there are elements of truth in the things that go around, but they're mostly based on either exaggerations or a lack of awareness. In a lot of cases, there are people I don't know that hate my guts, and I've said something to them in passing because I was busy, putting 10,000 people in a venue downtown for geekdom, and I might not even know who they are or who they were. And you combine that with learning to, care about people's feelings and not being so good at it over the years. And there have been a lot of insensitive things done, said, or body languages communicated. And if anybody talked to me about it, I would certainly talk to them about how that isn't what I intended. In a lot of cases, that's never been the case. In some cases, somebody told me I hurt their feelings, but I told them I didn't care because it was the right thing to do. And maybe once in a while, I've regretted saying that. But most of the time, the goal was the organization and the event. That's still how I operate. Typically, if it's you or the good of the con's the wheels on the bus, and you're under it. That's how it has to be. Somebody has to say no. So, Robert, there is truth in some of these cases. There's a huge exaggeration that goes around concerning an incident that, most guys would to try to be as PG as possible for your audience. Most guys would be glad they were in a situation that involved two women. And that story has become a story that's been twisted and contorted into a consent problem concerning me. And all I can tell you is if you ever get accused of something like that, you really want your long-term partner who was there to be able to say, that's a lie. And she's done that. But, it is what it is. I welcome anybody to ask me any question. I meet new people all the time. They say, hey, I've heard some weird stuff about you.
There actually is a question.
Hit me.
Lucas.
Ask me.
There's a question from Michael Hoff on Facebook. Michael Hoff says, is GMX really dead, and can we ignore the talk that it might come back at any moment?
My answer to this will be controversial and probably haunt me on social media for the next 2 weeks. So,
or 2 years.
Yes, or 5. So here's the deal. If you don't have anybody that loves something inside an organization enough to make it happen, and you do have some people that love it, but they aren't skilled enough to execute, and you've refused to give it to the one person that loved it the most, you don't have a very good argument after leaving it alone for years to bring it back. I don't expect GMX to return under anybody involved with what used to be the Arts Cube organization. It could. There have been conversations. Some are private that I won't share. Some are my own private conversations with other people that I won't share. And some are very open, like we'll bring it back one day. But at this point, as I understand it, there are people that are already burned out on the anime aspect of what they do, and they never loved anything else as much. So it's highly unlikely to me. But as far as I'm concerned, the name, it could be revived by somebody. It's been massively damaged. Most people that know me know my day job and still in my full-time freelance role now is brands. And I encounter brands all the time that are tarnished, beaten up, and just crap and need to be replaced. And I do that a lot. I've done a lot of rebrands in my career. It's hard to say if the GMX brand is damaged too much to have credibility again. And that's on everybody. That's on me and the fallout that I had and the public fight I had with my former collaborators. I own some responsibility for the tarnish on that brand. But there's nothing like neglecting something to tarnish the hell out of it. So it's hard, but it's a great name, and it would be great to see that.
Awesome.
What alternative to GMX do I recommend? I would have said Hypericon a couple of years ago. We were building Hypericon to be just that. I don't know if Hypericon's in the same bubble as postponing MTAC. The people that are postponing MTAC are the people that are gonna one day bring back GMX. The question is, how long do you give people to actually deliver? And when there's really no activity, I mean, Hypericon posts or canceled after no sign of a con existing this year, and you have to question, were you doing anything? So there's a lot of question. And man, I love geeks. I love you guys and every other geek, but we have the best talk big, do nothing syndrome in the entire world, and that's a big problem.
Amen.
I came from a culture, a lot of people that worked with me on cons, they got tired of hearing me talk about, I did best when I collaborated with guys that were in sports in high school and college and people that were in the military. And I was in band. Now, a band nerd saying it's anything like football or the military, that's kind of BS. I'm not going to try to present that as an equivalent. But the commonality there is the organization is the most important thing here. And if you're not prepared to leave everything at the door and do the best job you can to make this thing happen for 120 to 10, 15,000 of your fellow nerds, then you're here for the wrong reason. And if you treat it like a tree house or a D&D night, it ain't going to happen, or it's not going to happen well. So right now, alternatives, I was hoping we would see some of these new cons. Some of them are semi-profit. Some of them are straight up corporate for-profit. I was hoping to see some of them step into the void. Right now, the void is extremely weird. The void used to be just kind of a black hole, and now it's like Kessel. It's just this chaotic maelstrom with a weird freaking octopus in the middle of it. So I don't know what I recommend right now. What I recommend is if Dragon Con happens, go to Dragon Con and go from there. But we're still not sure if that's going to be a thing.
We have a bit of a follow-up from Michael Hoff as well. He says, is it the geek issue or the national community issue, the talk big, do nothing syndrome? Or does it happen nationally?
I can't fairly say if people like San Diego suffer that same thing, or if Emerald City or any of these other gigantic cons around the other coasts. Our third coast here is my biggest experience. I would say that from what I've seen in Ohio and heard through connections in various larger cons by way of Florida and Chicago and our region, it seems like it's a geek personality thing. Trust me, I know all about big ego. I bring one in the room, and I've acknowledged that I've dismissed people because their ego didn't fit in the room at the same time mine did, and we were better off without that fight. But I think there's an ego thing with geek culture where we didn't all grow up popular, right? Like we weren't exactly the cool kids. I mean, I think the kids now are growing up popular because we made this stuff cool. But they may not have grown up popular and are making up for it. I've definitely joked and told people if I had a time machine, I'd go back and find 16-year-old Lucas and tell him, hey, 30-something Lucas says, hold out, bro. But it still might be just an ego issue, a promising thing, trying to make yourself look big. I don't really know. It could be general human nature, and maybe the only thing that makes a difference is a paycheck, and we all do volunteer work for cons, so we fall on our face. But I sat up until 3 o'clock in the morning more often than not. I sacrificed a heavy percentage of my personal relationship at home and a heavy percentage of my early fatherhood for fandom. And I can assure you that some people don't just blow it off like a volunteer gig. It's treated just as much as a full-time job by a lot of people.
All right, we have another question from a Mr. John B. Pica. You have an ego? Question mark.
Oh, I think he knows more than anybody. I definitely do. And I've tried to be more aware of that. In my 20s, you had a hard time convincing me that it was ego that drove me. In my 30s, I started to realize it. I don't know where things sit in the 40s now, but I can say professionally, I've learned to separate myself and go to tell. I've told more bosses in the last 5 years, hey, look, your name's on the paycheck, and it still comes to my bank account every week or two. I really don't care if you don't like this, but here's my best work. And they like that. They know that, they're still the boss. I'm just giving them whatever I can give them as the best. I don't know if I knew that at younger ages. So I think that's part of managing ego. But yeah, sure, I have one. I think Johnny's well aware.
Nice.
Well, I'm 50 years old, and I can tell you right now that once you have it, it's always going to be there. I personally have, as you have, I've lost a few organizations and stuff because, quote unquote, I was a bit too bossy. But I got stuff done.
Right.
So I completely understand.
Sometimes, Robert, you have to be the butthole. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. Sometimes you have to be that person, because if you don't and you get run over because you got your feelings hurt, then your organization's not going to stand. You have to be solid. That's my 2 cents. I'm sorry, Lucas. What do you got to say about it?
That's very true. Somebody has to be the bad guy. Somebody has to be the bad cop. I would say that a mistake I probably made early on was my closest cohorts that helped me really craft what we were doing. They were also the bad guy. There was no good cop, bad cop. It was all a bunch of bad cops that were full of themselves. But it was hard for me to see past the respect. When you have people that are willing to ride around with you all day, zigzagging all over Nashville to try to sell ads to whoever will buy one in your program guide, you gain a lot of respect and tolerance. And I've tried to pledge to mentally pledge not to specify names and name names, because I don't want people saying, hey, he said something about you. So I'm not going to use a lot of names. But one of the people that was along for that ride, later on in con evolution, would have a huge falling out and a huge, very public, visible fight during con setup, and walked out. And they essentially quit the con on a Friday morning, Thursday night, something completely untenable. And it hurt a lot then, because that was a really close friend. We've drifted now, but one of the most painful things I had to do was look at that person and say, I can't save you from this. I can't fix this. I can't defend this, because the only defense I have is that I've been your friend for years, and that's not going to fly here. It's my own rule, and I'm not going to break it. That still hurts today, but you got to do it. Somebody has to do it. Robert, you're absolutely right. Well, I think Robert said he was the butthole, and Mike said you have to be. So you're both right.
Yeah. Let's lighten the mood just a little bit here. This shouldn't be, every confession of a con guru.
Exactly. Well, he is drinking, so it makes it better. So
makes it a little easier.
Right.
Yeah, I think
it goes
it's
down
smooth. 3.5 normal old fashions, and by now I've poured all the cherries into here. So it's.
But really, let's talk some fun stuff. What was the most surprising thing you ever encountered while running fan events?
Oh boy, people ask me that a lot. It's funny. People ask me either how to do stuff or how to run things, or they'll ask me, the fun. You said the most fun, right?
More surprising than fun.
More surprising. Okay.
Or bizarre.
Oh, okay. Yeah. So the most surprising thing to me, no one prepared. I mean, obviously, I just gave you the backstory. Nobody prepared me for anything that would happen in 15 to 20 years of this, but except for me. But the surprise to me was that there will be a surprise every time. Every time you're running a con, and I think everybody here that's got a speaking role in this video has the awareness, because you've run an event at some stage, that every time you think you've seen it all, something happens the next time that tops that thing, right? So, in 2002 with MTAC, it was the air conditioning failed in cascading sequence through each section of the ballroom, causing the dealer room to be 90 degrees, which was opened up into, I think it was the gaming room, which then became 90 degrees, and it failed. Eventually, it was just one big-ass room, which was exactly what I had pledged not to do. It was the kind of Star Trek convention setup that I grew up on that I thought was horrible, and I didn't want to do it, and we had to do it to keep people from sweating everything. I mean, you're a cosplayer. The last thing you need is more sweat on the part of the con, We're supposed to provide ice cold. We're supposed to have the hotel look at us like, you crazy. It's 58 degrees in here. Yeah, it is. Tell it to the furry. So, it's something you never want to do. So that happened. And then during the meeting after the con to complain to the hotel staff, we were talking about pest control issues that were reported. They swore that they just had an exterminator. And I shit you not, I was sitting next to the filing cabinet, and a little roach crawled up on the side of the filing cabinet, and it was like a cartoon. He stopped, and he kind of looked toward us and waved his freaking antenna. And I said, "Really? Like this one?" And they peered over their desk, and they sat back down, and they pulled out their Orkin business card and clearly planned to make a phone call. After that conversation was when my collaborators said that they would agree for me to review the hotel business and deal with them in the future. I don't always think on my feet perfectly. I've said plenty of dumb things on the spot, sometimes on stage in front of thousands of fans. But some of those ad libs really work out in your favor if you can come up with them. And then it just goes on from there, man. We had somebody cause us to shut down a whole floor because of an assault that turned out to be a lie, and drag people into the police station to make statements, and then her parents made her tell everybody the truth. We had parking issues that were crazy. We had parking so tight the fire trucks couldn't get up the hill, and that pissed a few people off. And then of course you work your way eventually. I mean, guys peeing on the floor in the hotel lobby while they're drunk, girl ODing off of whatever might have been lacing the water at a rave. Me being shoved the phone when somebody on security said, "Hey, her dad's on the phone, wants to talk to you." And I'm like, "Hello." And he says, "I would want to start by apologizing for my daughter's conduct." Like, "Oh, cool." Yeah, it's okay, man. So all these things.
You must be talking about the prostitutes.
I don't really know.
Don't even get started on that.
I don't really know. I don't remember a lot. This is a teenage girl of some.
That was a prostitute.
Okay. And of course, you work your way around to 10 years ago, the flood. Never in my wildest stress dreams about cons did I think that I would be running a con during a catastrophic natural event. If it weren't for, I think there was a tornado drill the year before where we had to cram everybody into the basement of the hotel per their rules on a Thursday during setup. And I think I had some familiarity with the emergency procedures and the sheer volume of the building. And it was a Sheraton on top of the hill, so flooding didn't really bother me. But that was definitely something I never thought I would see. And it rendered a lot of great stories. I mean, guests in the green room that are all from LA, and they're like watching the news going, why do you guys freak out about nature stuff? We have this kind of stuff all the time. And I'm like, we don't. And then, flights getting grounded and the community really rising to the occasion, all the vendors being cool about the stuff. Well, actually, the vendors didn't want their stuff back. Their warehouses were flooded. They were glad it was out, audio equipment, staging and stuff. And, the hotel letting people have extra nights and discounted rates for that. And then the guests just hanging out, doing BS on stage, just entertaining people. It was it
was amazing.
Great moment of how fandom can be resilient. But, the list just keeps going all the way down to, grumpy cat graffiti in the stalls in the bathroom at the Nashville Convention Center.
Crumple
zone. Speaking of fandom,
crumple zone.
Speaking of fandom, what do you think is next for fandom after this quarantine?
Ooh. I see Johnny with his Tanya Tate comment. No matter what anybody on the internet says, I barely even got to talk to or hang out with Tanya Tate, for the record. I also have a theory that they can be too big and she fits. Anyway, so the next stage, man, I don't know. I think in a lot of cases, fandom's going to follow. I tend to learn over the years from events that are similar. People used to stick people in a ballroom looking at a boring riser with a projector, and we decided we were going to do giant rock and roll music stages. Once everybody started doing giant rock and roll music stages, I started looking for what's the next thing. And with HyperionCon, we were building arena seating with a ground-based stage, like a community theater. Just do whatever is educated by the rest of the event world, right? So theater, film, being cinemas, sports, business conferences, they're all going to inform, just like the creation of the very first fandom cons, the very first like old school Star Trek conventions that were modeled after business conventions. There's a reason we have panels, right? Like all this stuff is born from kind of the business world and what these nerds knew in their corporate life, they applied to nerd life. And then it kind of gained its own norms. So I don't know what we're going to learn from first or when. Right now, considering the timing of Dragon Con, that's going to be the first litmus test. And any of us that go to Dragon Con are already invested. If you go to Dragon Con right now, almost May, you're invested to the tune of whatever the hell your hotel room costs, which is the price of a small used car.
About what, $1,500, $1,600?
I think I'm in $1,600, and my roommates, they pay. There's three of us, so they pay 2/3 of that, but it's all on my card. So, I don't mind doing that. It's a trade-off. Like, give me your money, I get the card on my Marriott card, I get all the points. It's fine, but people are invested. It's a complicated equation to change Dragon Con around. Now, could they do something drastic and say no at door and start, dispersing the crowd? Sure. And a lot of the old school crowd, the Thursday's a new Friday, Wednesday's a new Thursday, Tuesday's a new Wednesday party crowd, all of us would definitely be fine with that. We're there for people we know and the scene that we know, and we don't really need the Saturday afternoon bro crew that just wants to come get drunk and treat it like Mardi Gras with nerds, which it is Mardi Gras with nerds, and it's great. But I don't know what they can do, but they're going to be the example. I think if Dragon Con can happen, it's the first large con example of what we do in this era. I don't really know. Obviously, seating changes. I mean, you look at sports venues, they've spent decades learning how to cram the largest people into the smallest space and get the most money out of it. What's the profit margin? How do you explain a $45 Tuesday night ticket to a baseball game that's $400 on Saturday night? There's clearly some room. But what can all of those do that makes them work? And will fandom benefit from all this? Will this be a crushing blow to the hotel and meeting industry that takes them off their high horse and brings them back to normal? Because that's how we built what we built in Nashville. The late 90s, early 2000s, that was a time, especially after 2001. I mean, September 11th murderized the meeting industry. I mean, it was just dead. Nobody wanted to travel. Nobody wanted to fly. And nobody wanted to do any big events. Did that benefit us? Probably. Did we get better things in the contracts? Yes. Did we get way more reasonable rent? Absolutely. There are hotels in this town, and this is not even, well, now we are like Vegas, New York, and LA, but back then we weren't. And, pre-It City, Nashville was juicing way too much money out of these event rental prices. And that's one of the big roadblocks right now to a new event, at least a fan run event, is the cost coming through the door is wild. And there's no more wing it with credit. They want the money before the con. So if you've got $25,000, $40,000 in rental, you got to come up with it and cough it up a week out before you've created an income stream from at door based only on your dealers. And then you look at stuff like Wizard World and you start to understand, oh, that's why their ridiculous VIP package is way too high a price with way too few benefits, and their booths are all $1,200 because they're trying to figure out how to pay that rent in advance. So will it benefit us? Maybe. Maybe we can have cons. Maybe we can all have 2 cons a year and split our crowds up so there's room to breathe with your face mask. I do know this. The anime crowd has been dying for a reason to have to wear masks for a better part of 20 years, so they're going to be fine. They're going to wear masks everywhere, just like all the Asian groups.
Well, that's normal in Asian culture. I mean, yeah,
Right.
I mean, come on. I mean, they've got
Half
more
of them
pollution
were
and more
already
people.
doing it. Half
Right.
the weeaboos were already putting masks on for no reason.
So what do you think of this VCC model?
VCC.
Video
What we're
conference.
doing?
Okay. I think this is fantastic. I sit here shocked that you guys are basically the first to really put all in on this, at least from what I can see. I am a little surprised Reed Pop and Wizard and, if they weren't already falling apart, Heroes and Villains, some of these big guys that supposedly have all the money. I'm surprised none of them invented something or have at least announced something to fill this gap.
What they're doing that I've researched, Lucas, what they're doing right now is they're charging like $80 for you to talk to the celebrity for 2 minutes.
That makes one of my closer compadres over the years in con and fandom organizing is a talent agent. And one of the first conversations I had when the COVID hit the fan was, hey, how are you doing? And how in the hell do you make a living? And that was one of the things that was discussed very early on when all this started in that phone call, just to check in on him. That's cool, but that's not mass. That also causes the talent to have to work a lot. Normally the talent, they're already working acting, which they're not getting to do right now. So that's a big ding. No, I think that'll come back sooner than later. I mean, that's easy to protect. That it's easy to vet your guys for production. It's easy to tell people, okay, you're coming in, you're getting tested, and you're going all to your tents for 2 weeks, and we're all going to stay here on the set together, and nobody has any viruses. But it's going to change the way they pay talent and such. But I don't know that model is sustainable. I think what you're doing with the community-based discussions, but a little bit of production value. I mean, look what you guys have done in a very short period of time with very basic tools. I mean, imagine what would happen if you rallied all the people that do all these things to come in and start nailing certain stuff. Imagine if an online marketplace that was fully flown that could actually take orders happened for your dealer room, your virtual dealer room. I mean, there's so many places that this can go, and it could be a thing. It could be a thing.
So are you offering to come on with us?
I thought about it already, but until I figure out how much of a lead I have on freelance income, right now I'm about a month and a half ahead on clients for what I need to pay the bills. And if we find that that's the norm, then it's certainly in my consideration.
Yeah, that was already the conversation, Robert, that me and this man had before when you asked me, and I said I know who I need to make a phone call to. So we've been in the loop.
You mean to tell you how much money we've put into this event?
I'll give away all of our secrets. Goodness gracious.
$5?
A little bit
Less.
more than that.
I was going to say 0, but I didn't want to be too assumptive.
No.
Too much of an assumption.
We have probably put in about 150 between all three of us. And now we do have the tip jar, and everything in that tip jar goes to the panelists. So far, we had believe it or not, we had 700 participants yesterday.
Nice.
Mm-hmm.
We had $10
Are
in
you
the tip
counting
jar.
individuals, or are you counting every hour of those people tuning in?
We're counting views.
So that counts people twice if they view twice, right?
I'm not sure. It depends.
I don't know.
Facebook is
Where I'm
they have
going
to
with
minimum
this
watch
is
30 seconds.
used to just apply Wizard's theory of turnstile attendance, and every time an hour goes by, that person becomes a second person. And so if they view for 8 hours, there's 8 people. And because if you walk outside and come back in from a smoke break, think about how many times a smoker smokes.
Yeah.
And divide that into Wizard attendance figures. And there's nothing wrong with turnstile if you want to use turnstile, but turnstile is how Wizard gets out there and says, tens of thousands of your fellow fans.
People. Yeah.
When it's really tens of hundreds of your fellow fans. You just see them multiple times through the turnstile. But to really get down to the answer to that, I really was hoping somebody would lead. I was hoping San Diego, when I saw that they were going to cancel, I was hoping the next breath was, but we're doing an online con. At this point, maybe BlizzCon is the one to teach everybody how to do it because they've had an online con element for so long. They can maybe expand that.
Theirs is like a live stream thing, though. Last time I checked out about BlizzCon, isn't it pretty much just a live stream of the whole convention?
Yeah, it is. I think they could do more stuff.
Interactive, maybe.
Said for the loft broadcast that San Diego does, where you're hovering over the dealer room and talking to talent. There's a lot to be said for key attendees, super fans. Like I've been shocked that pro wrestling performed to an empty room when they easily have 100 people that would say, the hell with it, I'm going to Florida for 3 months, and put them in a camp, test them, and keep them by themselves, feed them, and stick them in the live broadcast every time. I can't believe somebody with that much money and that much resource didn't think that far ahead. Watching wrestling with no audience is the most bizarre.
Yes, it was
ever.
Well, as me and Blake said, the reason we did this is because Mid-South Con got canceled.
Yeah.
Now, I'm on the Mid-South Con Masquerade staff. I'm on the Shadow Con pre-event staff. I actually run the pre-event area for Shadow Con. And we were at Cece's having pizza.
Mm-hmm.
And we said, this sucks. I mean, we don't have a con to go to. So why don't we make one?
Right.
Okay. 48 hours later, after I reached out to 1 or 2 or 10 people that I know, and through cons and through acting and just through me being who I am, we had almost a full roster of guests in 48 hours. And that blew me away. It blew me away that so many people were willing to give up their time and their expertise to make this happen. We've got a young lady in California that if we did not have her, we wouldn't have a website. We would not have some of the infrastructure that we have. This woman is phenomenal, and she does this for a living.
Yeah,
She is a con coordinator for a living, and I'm going to sing her praises after this, even when the physical cons come back, because the woman is a beast.
Well, I've always seen a weakness to the digital avenue for fandom. And I actually have a friend in Chattanooga whose whole business, he quit his full-time job and started an agency that doesn't do anything but live event, social media, etc. coverage. I had breakfast with him the morning the SEC announced their, they invited everybody to announce that they were going to go no audience, and they really announced that they were going to call it off. So I had breakfast with a guy that they're his client an hour before they did that. And by lunchtime, I was texting him saying, "Ooh, boy, rough day," But that has been a weakness in events across the board, especially fandom. A couple of years ago, I was working with Arby's on a plan to sponsor HyperionCon, and the plan for Arby's, I found out a whole bunch of stuff about Arby's. They're one of their main digital marketing people is a cosplayer with a pretty decent following. And like their main marketing guy went to MTSU the same time I did. He's into golf and pro wrestling. So if you ever wondered why Arby's social media is golf jokes, pro wrestling jokes, video game jokes, and nerd jokes, that's why. And I noticed that. And I summoned their attention. I made a Nashville skyline. I went to Arby's and spent like $30 on random bullshit. And I made a Nashville skyline out of Arby's stuff. and made a social media post tagging them, and they replied. And they said, "We hear you." And I said, "Great, let's have a conversation." That turned into a conversation over a few weeks. And what we were aiming to do was to create an Arby's live stream on their page of the official Arby's backstage show of the masquerade. So you would step off the stage as a cosplayer, and you would be broadcast to 25,000 or whatever freaking subscribers Arby's has, interviewed by a person on behalf of Arby's about your costume and how it felt to do what you just did. And anyone would be able to view that for free. And what's Arby's got from it? Well, think about where they can go. The encouragement at the time was use Hypericon as a test. And once you prove this model and you have it, go to San Diego, because then it's off the hook. And that was the thing that ultimately they did. They did participate in bigger cons. They didn't have the resources in the time frame that we needed. They were going to bring an Arby's food bus and just feed everybody all weekend in the parking lot. There was a lot of cool stuff, but that's basically the weakness that we're talking about. This kind of stuff you're doing, and hopefully San Diego, or if DragonCon, hopefully not, but if DragonCon has to scale back or cancel or postpone or any of that, hopefully there's somebody that's big and powerful enough to start doing more, or this stuff that you're doing gets seen. I mean, I'm still blown away that some of the locals haven't done it. It blows my mind that the digital generation running MTAC didn't do virtual 20th anniversary MTAC. It blows my mind that MomoCon, which is backed and partnered with DragonCon, didn't go to some virtual, that they just canceled, threw their hands up, and walked away. It doesn't surprise me with Hypericon, because it didn't appear that they were planning a con. But there are cons that are not just those that have had to do things. There's a Tom Kroom, who is a Southeastern fandom guy that you can look up, Google him. He's got a running list of postponements and changes that he's publishing online. And there are dozens of events. You can't tell me these people don't have the resources that you guys have to do what you're doing in at least something happening.
What resources?
Wait, right. Hold on. Lucas. Here's a question. And this is a deep question. Being that some of these cons we know personally, me and you, that canceled, postponed, if they want to say postponed or anything. One major one that you know of, do you think they will be, I'm not going to name names, do you really think that they could bounce back after this? That, their resources will be there, knowing what conversations we have had, that they have the resources and the funding, being the big word, to bounce back after this?
I don't have a lot of inside knowledge on the budgets for the local events or regional events. The only one I can guarantee you that's solid money-wise is Dragon. But I'm not 100% sure that some of these events can take the hit, but also there's a momentum problem. It took a lot of work to build 120 dwindling attendees at Hypericon into the momentum to top 500.
Oh, I know. I was there.
Yeah, exactly. And so, and that is, that's a con that was kind of lax and didn't really put their all into it sometimes, and didn't keep up with trends. And good for you if you want to do that, but don't hope that you can be more than a family picnic within 3 years, because the venues don't care. The venues don't care about your spirit and how much you want to hang out with each other. The venues need butts in the seats that give you money to pay the big giant bills. So there's an equation there that you have to work out, but I don't know, and I don't have reason to know anything, but the information I do get occasionally mentioned to me by chats with people is that there are leadership changes in the mix in some of these local events. And if you were trying to make a leadership transition at the 20th anniversary and your 20th anniversary just got canceled, what happens? Do you push yourself, stay, make that transition later, or you just throw your hands up and say, the hell with it, I got to go about my adult life? Good luck.
We'll see.
Is it possible to combine this with a physical con, a new physical con, and combine this with it too, and make it a total package?
Entirely. It should have happened already. And that was what I realized with Hypericon was the weakness. And to their credit, some of the very fundamental core folks within HyperionCon realized, hey, digital is a thing. I think Blake probably remembers this. We discovered that Daryl was a big fan of Twitch. Like, who knew? You know, one of the old guys was a Twitch guy and was telling us Twitch is where it's at. We need to do some Twitch. And this, what you're doing, well, of course, I don't know how long StreamYard has been around. This StreamYard thing is super cool. I was really impressed when I got to see it. This is the secret, getting out to multiple channels at the same time, because my answer to Twitch was, I don't give a shit about Twitch. My 13-year-old knows Twitch. But you know, he did YouTube, whatever. Like, I'm not going to follow a new platform. I'm going to go on Facebook Live where it's easy and you know, old people know how to do things. But that's the secret, is getting that content out there. I really feel, first of all, we know because Coachella proved live streams for free don't hurt your attendance. So that's blown out of the water. Coachella and Eventbrite did a study. They know that you can offer your show for free to people online, and it doesn't do anything to stop your growth in person. So that's already done. That's packed up. That's a fact. So that was what I was working with the whole digitize HyperionCon. Somebody has got to do that. You know, hey, it may be us, but it needs to be where we're at already. This should have been a no-brainer for somebody, and the only entity that it was a no-brainer for was BlizzCon, as far as I can tell. Nobody else really had a good online element, and I think now a lot of them are going to grow one. And also, Joe, who said hi, by the way, hi Joe. Joe said he's betting DragonCon is planning and beta testing right now for virtual. You might be right. I know somebody that's a daily employee, paid full-time salaried employee of DragonCon that I went to college with. He's really good at not answering my questions. I have, you know, teased a little bit, but I also don't want to just, you know, pump for information. This is a friend of mine for years. I want to know how he's doing, not just, hey, what can I get you for on DragonCon? But he would never tell me. But I think you could be right about that, Joe. Venues need butts in the seats that rent. Yeah, exactly. The hotel room equation, that may get out of whack. That you know, this may teach them that any money is good money, and maybe they should come back off that horse. Nashville's hotel and convention meeting space industry has really had a shit don't stink attitude for a few years now, and hopefully that'll get attenuated a little bit. They'll get checked a little bit by this particular crisis. But the side effect has been all these venues. I mean, you can rent a room at almost anywhere now. Like, everybody has been smart enough to get a room that you could rent in their business model, because it's so prohibitive to do business with hotels and convention centers. If I made a con tomorrow, and some of you had this conversation with me in private, if somebody dropped $100,000 to $250,000 in my lap tomorrow, I'd make a multi-venue downtown con with a couple of different hotels and a whole lot of different spaces people would move around to and go to different events, because that's where we are culturally now. And that's where we were headed with MTAC. If the divorce had never occurred, MTAC is going to be a campus convention in Murfreesboro at multiple hotels right there at that Embassy Suites.
We were speaking with a guest yesterday that is very, very interested in getting into some deeper conversations with us. So we may be tapping you on the shoulder.
Well, everybody that knows me knows advice is almost free. And who knows? Before COVID, when I was actually, some people probably have made up, you know, because they'll make up anything they can about me. Some people have probably made up some story about me getting run out of my job. The company I worked for, a great company, but they're a great company for private equity investors, not for people that love brands. They don't value internal marketing. They don't get it. They like outsourcing. So the marketing team has been shaved gradually. And the point at which I said, okay, cool, we got new messaging, new stuff ready to go. I can't wait to quarterback this. When do we get started? Woohoo! They were probably put in the corner about, okay, well, we're not really as serious as he is, so we're going to have to let him go. So the team has been trimmed. In mid-February, I was already on the job market. And that went well until this virus thing happened. I've talked to a lot of CEOs, a lot of presidents, a lot of VPs, and a lot of directors about joining marketing teams, different companies. And all of those have been frozen. But the whole time, I did freelance heavily with several clients, including former CEO of the company I used to work for. He has a new venture now. We signed up to do a bunch of stuff that's now kind of on hold for that. So basically, this freelance branding thing has been going really well. I was going to do that. I was going to go to Raleigh for a week, live with a buddy of mine, and talk about starting our own business. And then this happened. So right now we're kind of holding, and I'm really thankful, and I'm having a lot of fun. Honestly, I got a home services renovation guy. I got a lawyer. I got a global company coming along for a new logo. There's some cool work that I'm fortunate enough to be doing right now. I feel really lucky, and I know there's some people out there that are struggling, and it's really awful. And I feel really bad that we're in this place where we just can't tolerate something we should have been able to plan for. But we'll get through it. And on the other side, if I'm freelancing or doing a small agency of my own, the side projects are going to come.
Well, we have a question from California Comic Con coordinator, who is actually the young lady I spoke of that is, she has been a godsend for this event. She goes, what do you think is the financial solvency of the current top Comic Cons? Were they prepared for an emergency situation such as this? And if not, will we see more new upstarts as we change from the old guard to the new guard on the Comic Con scene?
Yeah, I think there will be new critters in the ecosystem for sure. Partly because the barriers, like we've talked about with the venues, the barriers to entry may be lower. People might be able to get their local event center to make a reasonable deal. Let's think about how much the market changed when I famously swore that we couldn't afford to go to the Vanderbilt Marriott Hotel in Nashville for MTAC in 2004. And we toured it a few weeks out. We were desperate. We had been dumped by our venue that was going into remodeling. They hadn't told any clients. And it turned out our lawyer found out that Tennessee law doesn't care. The agreement is worthless if they do something like that, unless you're willing to really take them to court. And we were just a bunch of guys with an anime con, so that we weren't going to spend the money on it. So we were homeless looking for a place. And because of the timing, we got into a gap in their business. $1,500, I think. Might have been $1,100. Think about that for 3 days on West End. It doesn't happen now. It's 25 a day. And I don't mean 100. 25,000 a day right now. If those kinds of deals return, then you'll see a barrier of entry dropping for all kinds of stuff. Problem is, you'll see a lot of people that have no business running events, starting events, and failing and spending all their money. Sometimes it's granddaddy's credit card. Sometimes it's personal debt. Sometimes it's personal savings. People do it all kinds of ways, but it will be a barrier of entry that might be lower. So yes, there should be some new players. As far as the financial solvency, I'm not led to believe that some local events aren't already starting in the hole every year. I'm under the impression that a lot of folks don't have a ton of money in the bank, and some of them have a large amount of debt outstanding to certain venues and even personal investments from committee members that I don't know if they'll ever get them back. Now, can it be done without a lot of personal debt? Maybe. If some of them innovate, maybe. Don't forget, we raised $8,000 on fan investment with HyperionCon. I came up with a new model for lifetime membership that was a fan investment of $1,000, and we got over $8,000 from fans that wanted the event to happen. It was basically the same idea as crowdsource funding online, just without all the BS and actually giving something directly to people instead of inserting some other entity in the mix. So there's plenty of creative ways. I don't know how much money people have sitting right now, or at least that they can afford, because it may be already set aside for big down payments on guests or travel or the venue rent. DragonCon probably has money on hand. Anything that is a corporation, even if it's fan run like Dragon, they probably have a business model in place where there's plenty of investment possibilities. But how much and what it's earmarked for, I don't know. San Diego ought to have plenty of money. New York ought to have plenty of money. Maybe WonderCon. We all know Wizard is bleeding money left and right. They don't have real money. They just have, investors and disconnected CEOs that don't have anything to do with fandom most of the time. So I don't know if they can survive something like this. Reed has plenty of money because they're part of a big corporation that does meetings. But it's going to be interesting to see who does what. Then you got local guys like Mark Ballard. Yeah. Dude's not running a world-class polished show, even though several of us have been talking to him and giving him good ideas, and he may do some really cool stuff. Maybe he steps into that void that was mentioned earlier. But, for Mark, it's a personal venture, and he's directly in control of everything. So, when the caca has started to fly, I'm sure he's put his head down and made some smart decisions, and he'll make up for those later. And his venue expenses are pretty low and reasonable. So there's some flexibility some people have, but I don't know how much anybody's just sitting around with the nest egg. Some of these organizations could take advantage of small business funding and some of the relief funding, but unfortunately, not a lot of them are run by people smart enough to think about it or do it correctly. So I don't know where that lands.
Well, a lot of times you have people who are rabid about the geekdom but have no business sense. And I mean, personally, I don't have a lot of business sense, and I'll be the first to admit it. But I have a tendency to look for people around me that have the skills that I'm looking for. And I even did that when I was doing a pirate organization. I looked for people that had specific skills, and I recruited upon skills, not always upon personality, but a lot of times I recruited more on skill than anything else. I would watch somebody, I would sort of learn who they are, and I would recruit based on what they could bring to the table.
Yeah, for me, a lot of that, and then the trust factor. I mean, I took a lot of flack over the years for the public safety team in the earlier days of MTAC, but I had one standard, which was I don't want some chucklehead with a boken that thinks he's a ninja in a half cosplay watching the door at a room. It's unprofessional, and it's BS. So we're not going to do that. In fact, a lot of the things we said we were not going to do were formed by other regional cons, and I'm going to give them the grace of not mentioning names, but let's just say we wasted a couple trips to Atlanta on lackluster experiences as anime fans. So, there were some standards that I wanted to see. And then I saw these people doing choreographed combat. They were all certified, and they had physical awareness and certifications that indicated that. And they had a tight-knit group of people, and I'd seen them work together and perform at Renaissance festivals of all things. And I saw key people from my RenFest days in that group, and I know them. They're stand-up people you can trust. They swing steel at your face, miss on purpose, and don't kill anybody. Cool, let's have these guys come in, and they'll perform, and they'll do public safety. And that established a standard that mostly continues now, even under the current guard. And there's something to that, the trust and the skill sets that can translate. I mean, I used to tell people, recruit for public safety from cops, firemen, ex-military, current military, National Guard, etc. Because I knew those skills came in handy in identifying certain traits, and sometimes not, but everybody that knows me personally on Facebook knows how I feel about cops. So I consider myself the balance. If I've got an ex-cop or current cop working, I know how to balance that concern. But you're right. You're absolutely right. That's the way to look at it.
Well, I think this hour is just about up.
It is.
Yeah, it is. As we know, you could go on for hours yourself, Lucas, but we can't have that. We do have to keep a tight schedule, as some people would say. So we really appreciate you coming and spending your time with us today.
Thank you guys for doing that.
Any final words you'd like to say before we let you go?
That could be many, so watch out, Robert. That was a loaded question.
No, I get you. No, you know what I would say is, keep on keeping on. I think you guys did something really cool with this, and there's no reason it has to be specific to this era, this virus era. And who knows, now that I've been introduced to some of this tech and I've set up all this stuff, maybe I'll see some of you guys on my own stuff. I've been looking at doing some streaming, so it'll be a lot of fun to get with you on it.
That'll be wonderful.
That'll work.
All right. See you later, everybody.
Thank you.